Hi, everybody. Welcome to Monday. And yes, more Last of Us 2 content. This won't let me go. This isn't even more about the game. This is about the marketing of the game. If you like this sort of content, help support this channel, become a monthly patron, patreon.com/LeannaK. Because I'll tell you, I've taken a lot of crap for my views on this game. It's been a long time since I've been condescended to and dismissed. Like, I don't understand the need some people have to gaslight over a video game, but oh man, it has been something. And this is what tends to happen in games, these games that try to make a point, right? But this article came out on Thursday. And I was like, brr? And it sort of confirmed certain suspicions I had about some of the things that were going on in this game. Remember I said it was manipulative? There were deliberately manipulative things about this game? Well, at least with the marketing, that's confirmed. And it came apparently from Neil Druckmann himself. Don't take my word for it. Apparently, he did a podcast. And in that podcast, he made some comments that confirmed to an extent some things. So let's just go over. This reporting is from, what is this website? Game Revolution. Here we are. I'm down in the bottom corner. And it says, this article contains spoilers for The Last of Us 2. I'm not sure what the spoilers are. I don't see them. But apparently, Neil Druckmann went on a Kind of Funny Games podcast and talked about the fact that he made the marketing deliberately misleading because he was inspired by Metal Gear Solid 2, hence the picture of Raiden here. Okay. And he said, we try to think about what kind of game do we want to play and what are the expectations that we want to have going into that, Druckmann explained. Metal Gear Solid 2 is one of my favorite games, and there's no question that was an inspiration in this. I know some people hated it, but I loved when I played Metal Gear Solid 2, and I saw those trailers, and I was at that E3. It was one of the first E3s I went to, and you were deceived. They moved boss battles around. You always saw Snake, and they never showed you Raiden. It was then... He then recalled actually getting behind the sticks and controlling Raiden's introductory swimming segment, and then thinking it was fucking awesome when the blonde dork took off his mask and revealed his decidedly non-Snake face. The turn comes late, and it's so much to me about the joy when the game does that, he said. Okay. And apparently this inspired the deliberately misleading editing in the Last of Us 2 game trailers. Now, I wasn't watching the trailers for this kind of stuff. So I didn't catch this stuff, but a friend of mine did. That she had a very different... She was a huge fan of the first game and was very excited when this game came out. She was all looking forward to getting it until she watched one of my Let's Plays on Twitch, and she was like, well, you just saved me a bunch of money. I'm not buying it now. It was because she felt misled. And the other thing this article talks about is the restrictive review embargoes that wouldn't let reviewers discuss the last half of the game. Now, this part is a bit odd to me, I admit. So we're just gonna look at the intent behind Neil Druckmann's comments and get into the whole thing about reviews and stuff like that later. But here we go. Some reviewers criticized the restrictive process. It says PR tried to open up those restrictions, but Druckmann and the studio put their foot down. I'm wondering who the studio was, but in fact, PR told us to let people say whatever they want in reviews. Reviewers are going to get upset with this restriction, and we said we didn't care. I know the leaks are out there. Not everyone has seen the leaks. In fact, most people who play the game will not have seen the leaks, but they will read reviews. And I know if the restrictions are not there, sometimes reviews try to one-up each other in what they say. They're going to talk about it, so I'd rather have the restrictions and eat some people's frustrations. I have no idea what he means by some reviews trying to one-up each other. You're under an embargo. All the major reviews end up at the same time. You have no ability to compare what anybody else is doing. I'm not sure what the one-up each other means. The problem with his argument that stuff in the latter half of the game is it all a surprise is that they spoil their own game in the previously on The Last of Us segment right at the beginning. It's no shock what one of the big twists is because they call so much specific attention to this one scene that you're like, why are they focusing so much on that part? And as soon as the big the round of golf happens, I was like, oh, this is that. I avoided spoilers for The Last of Us 2. It was kind of funny when I watched that scene and people were like, is this the first you're seeing? It's like, yeah, I avoided spoilers. I saw little like screen grabs here and there and stuff, but I wanted to avoid spoilers. I wanted to give this game a chance. I was a big fan of the first game. Started getting somewhat concerned with the phenomenon around the DLC just because of too much focus on the personal lives of children in an M for mature game. Don't get me wrong. It would be fine if they wanted to make a game for teenagers exploring teen relationships, but I don't think it's healthy for adults to be that fixated on the love lives of, well, the Last of Us DLC was a prequel, so they were about 13, 14 years old. Even 19, okay, technically it's legal, but too young for me, right? Okay, so that part's creepy. But let's discuss this idea that you can just do what Metal Gear Solid did in 2001, in 2000, and I guess it was 18, 18, they would have started showing it because it was supposed to be out last year and then it was delayed. But so first of all, it's 20 years, man. Times change. Like, could you imagine somebody going in and like, you know, yeah, I want to do something Mortal Kombat did in the 90s. Like, what? Why? Huh? What? Huh? And there's two main complaints, or there's two main critiques I have with this. And some of you who are new to this channel should know I don't go this hard on things unless I have a really, really, really good reason. And I finally realized when I read this article that the thing that's just repelling me about this entire product and the entire phenomenon surrounding the product is the narcissism. And I'm starting to wonder if I can tell how narcissistic a person is just by how much they liked or did not like the game. Because the further I get into it, the more I can't stand it. And I'm way past the point of if I was just playing it myself, I would have stopped. It's like, it is very rare for me to not finish a game. I would probably not finish this game if I wasn't streaming it, in part because it's too slow. Every twist is incredibly predictable and telegraphed. And that's one of the reasons I don't understand the secrecy. There's nothing so special in this game that it's worth that. It's not like the end of, ironically, Death Stranding, that again, you can figure it out if you're paying attention, but I did figure it out midway. I forget exactly what it was Lindsay Wagner's shoes. I have a big pet peeve about high heels in sand. And the high heels in sand in that game were a tell. It was a clue. And that's Kojima. He does things deliberately. But that's the point. Kojima is a master of setting and then subverting expectations. It is very hard to do what he does, and he does it knowing not everybody's going to get it. Some people who are much bigger fans of the Metal Gear franchise than I am told me that move was very controversial when they did it in Metal Gear 2, swapping out Snake for Raiden, or Raiden for Snake. Solid Snake. There's a lot of snakes in Metal Gear. I admit I have kind of trouble telling them apart. Because there's like Liquid Snake and there's these other snakes. So many snakes. But people didn't really warm to Raiden until Metal Gear 4. It was a controversial move. But that's the thing about Kojima. He's not afraid to do things that other people are just not going to get. He's prepared for that. And when there's dust-ups about marketing for a game, he leans into them. That is part of the experience. And that's why what they did with the marketing for Metal Gear 2 in 2001 is totally different than what Last of Us 2 did. Metal Gear 2. Why do I keep saying Metal Gear 5? Because I got all the things in quiet in the back of my head and all that stuff. Metal Gear 2, among other themes, was about things like perception and the media's ability to influence that perception and how easily media can convince you of things that are not true. It pretty much predicted the fake news environment that we live in now. And so, much like Kojima does, the process of interacting with the game begins with the marketing. And so with, Metal Gear 2, the deception was part of the experience. The same way he deliberately objectified Quiet in Metal Gear 5. That's why I'm thinking of Metal Gear 5 all the time, because I fell for that one. I fell for the Quiet one because it was a shift away from characters like Big Boss. The fact that he deliberately objectified Quiet in the lead up to the game and set everybody's expectations about Quiet being a kind of shameless, eye candy, fan servicey character. It makes you, and this, Kojima, you crafty, it makes you care more about what happens to her in the game. That actually made me feel bad for prejudging the character. And I didn't make the same mistake with Fragile in Death Stranding, because then I saw it coming. But the twist in Death Stranding was different. That he couldn't set it up the same way because it was like, oh my God, just get the game made. And in a way, that sort of lack of setup was the setup. Everybody was like, what is this game? How do you explain this game? We don't know what this game is. It's Norman Reedus with oil prints on his butt. And yet somehow it was the one game where, no, that's exactly where it is. It's an experience. You have to sort of take it on its own terms. But with Metal Gear 5, the fact that everybody sort of wrote Quiet off as nothing means you start her journey treating her the same way other characters in game treat her. And as you go with her through, fighting off people who are trying to hurt her and her moments of joy and the juxtaposition between, doing what she has to do for survival and then this childlike wonder, you almost connect with the character harder because you did prejudge her. And Kojima's tendency to have very interesting faces on his female characters. They're not traditionally like straight up, ideally beautiful, whatever that means, but we all know what it means. It adds something. And so the marketing for Kojima games start you in exactly the right place to get the best experience out of the game. Now, apparently, I don't know if this is true, but I read that part of the reason they swapped out Raiden for Snake is because some women who were working on the game, he overheard them talking about how unlikable Snake was and how they didn't like it. It was like, oh, okay, I gotta make this more interesting. It was also apparently that the tutorial wouldn't make sense if you were telling a seasoned veteran what to do. And it's like, oh, that's interesting. So, but he knew that was going to be controversial and that some people would not be able to overcome it. Now, let's face it, there's a lot more gameplay in Metal Gear games than in large portions of Last of Us 2. But that's not the only problem with copying the what of it without understanding the why. If you're going to do what Kojima does, you have to come at it in service of the work. You have to come at it from a place of intense humility. And that is not what Neil Druckmann and company did here. I think it's mostly Neil Druckmann. But that is not what happened here. But in his own words, he liked it, even though other people didn't. And so he wanted to copy it. And this is the moment where I'm like, he knows about game design. He's been around long enough to know the things the rest of us know about the fundamentals of interactive storytelling. And, gameplay and story have to work together. And that's why I'm saying this is just narcissism kicking in. It's like he spent all the time after The Last of Us 2 came out, smelling his own farts via the hype machine surrounding that first game, not recognizing what made that first game work is that he listened to people and tweaked things as it went along instead of, well, I liked it, screw the rest of you. And here's the problem is that faking people out that way is not one of the themes of The Last of Us 2. I admit I'm not quite sure what the themes are of The Last of Us 2 because it is so unevenly written. But something revenge, something forgiveness. First of all, you gotta do more than that in 2020. We've seen that story so many times. But also, what does that have to do with deliberately misleading people with gameplay footage? Now, sometimes things change. Sometimes you have to tweak things slightly for a demo or for gameplay footage because you just, either the development process totally changes. You discover that features are not working, so you just have to rip them out, or certain things have to tweak or something like that. Or you need like a nice, easy ending for your demo. And so little things get tweaked. I have experienced that a lot, that I'll have played a demo and then gone and played the game. It's like, oh, that's a little different. But yeah, we wanted a complete experience in the demo, and you didn't want, these things that were irrelevant it's a locked off experience. They have to separate it from the game, polish it, put it out there for something that's playable. But that's not this. He says that they deliberately misled people. What is that saying? That like, if you want to say trust no one, except that's not consistent with the themes. If that was it, it's that he wanted to put people in a place of distrust, that would make sense, except that doesn't reflect the characters' early choices in the games at all. And so it's like, what was this doing? Well, now we know what it was doing. I like this, therefore I'm going to do it to other people. That's not enough. Like, that's something like somebody in college does with their first project, and they're knocked out of it really fast when the if you've got a good professor at all, they say, why'd you make that choice? Well, I liked it. That's not enough. Why'd you make that choice? Explain that choice. Be conscious about your choice, because it's not about you as a developer, not with a AAA game. It's about the end user experience. Take your ego out of it, get back to the drawing board. And that's why I'm saying, like, somebody who's been around long enough and managed to make good games, they don't start in that place. That happens when they've been smelling their own farts too long. Compare the original BioShock to BioShock Infinite. That's an example of a guy, has a lot to offer the industry, smelling his own farts. Even as the Metal Gear franchise went on, now we don't know how much of that was Konami interference, probably a lot of it. But that's what was so awesome about Death Stranding, is that this was a guy digging himself out of having to restart his entire career. And there are periods that there are parts of that game that are definitely designed to communicate what that felt like to the player. But it was not done as an ego thing. It was done as, let's share this. Not, I'm going to inflict this upon you. It's, let's share this feeling. Let's connect. That was the theme of the game. Connection. And, you don't get much more connected than a handprint on your butt, but that's a joke. There was a method to all of that is not in this game. And this speaks to a really difficult, more art than science element of creative industries. Everybody wants creative control. Absolute creative control is not good. Case in point, Star Wars. Movies that didn't have a ton of money and had to get creative, classics. The more it became this juggernaut of a franchise, the more it started smelling its own farts. And it's kind of weird because that wasn't even smelling his own. Like, it was like J.J. Abrams was smelling George Lucas's farts, and then what's his nuts? The guy on the second movie, he farted all over the place, and he was smelling his own farts a lot. And then the director on the episode 9 was like, I can't take the smell of these farts. I'm going on for something else. And so J.J. Abrams kind of came back and sucked up his own farts, as well as the farts from the other guy, whose name apparently I have blanked on for my own protection. There's another example of how subverting audience expectations really didn't work with The Last Jedi in a lot of cases. Even though Mark Hamill acted his butt off in that movie. I mean, I didn't like what they did with Luke. I love what he did with what they did with Luke. It was just, bless Mark Hamill. I can't believe I don't remember the guy's name. But a lot of fart smelling, like hotboxing circle jerking, baked beans, fart smelling in Star Wars. And then The Mandalorian happens, very, very free of fart smelling, because it was TV, live action. It had never done before. It was humble, fresh air. It's tough to maintain your creative vision and not fall into that area of smelling your own farts. Not crunching is one of the best ways to do it. Have a life outside of your job. But you also need people who can tell you no that you will listen to. And this interview is an indication that nobody could say no to Neil Druckmann on this project, and it shows. You always need someone who is willing to tell you and is able to tell you when something sucks. I'm doing a project right now. I can't say too much about it, but the thing I love about the team is they're great with me being more blunt than intended at certain parts when I think something's not good, because they recognize it's in service of the work. Like, it's very refreshing after that fake nicey Bay Area corporate bullshit I got so used to for so long. It's a nice change. But there's an example of a company that is not smelling its own farts and wants that kind of feedback and is made better by that kind of feedback. Now, does that mean that, whenever somebody tells you, I don't like this, you listen to them? Well, there's a difference between listening to them and just caving, right? You can ask, like, what don't you like about it? Or what would be a better way of going about it? And if it's like, I just don't like it, maybe there's a way to contextualize things better. Maybe there's a way of, and sometimes it's little things that make it much clearer for somebody. You get somebody on that track. That's really important feedback to have. And that's the sort of feedback that was missing in The Last of Us 2. There was obviously nobody there who could say, like, look, Ellie is a character in Wyoming by way of Boston. She wouldn't talk like somebody from, the left coast. Little things like, this character probably wouldn't say this way. This character probably wouldn't say things this way. And this is where we get into the kind of diversity that game dev teams should have and often don't, despite all their left coast rhetoric. The idea that you're telling a story about, Joel is from Texas and ends up in Wyoming. Ellie is from Boston and ends up in Wyoming. And yet in the second game, they're all talking like they're from San Francisco, like Silicon Valley, or even maybe LA. But they're certainly not talking like the people from any of the places that they're actually from. And I suspect part of that is Troy Baker just wanted to get the hell out of there. But that's a detail that you can fix if you have people there who are like, whoa, hold up. I'm from these places. No, that's not how it works. Especially since, the clock's been rolled back on how people live in a lot of ways. And that kind of feedback's really important. And even if you don't have somebody hired on the team, for God's sake, somebody's gotta have family. Somebody's gotta have somebody you can talk to, that you get under NDA and you let them look at it. And it's a frustrating, sometimes depressing process of a few more pairs of eyes on it. Trust me, I've been through it. I'll have written something And then everybody is like, okay, it's great. And then they give it to somebody else to read, which is their right as the client. And then they're like, oh, this person didn't get it. And I'm like, but, no, we don't have to change everything. But let's not dismiss everything. Let's listen because, okay, somebody didn't get it. Who's to say they're not right and I'm wrong, right? It's possible. And it's not even a question of right or wrong. It's a question of this can be clear to this type of person, but not clear to this type of person because of different life experiences. And that's its own form of accessibility. And like, I'm going to give it another week or two, probably 2 weeks before I really start getting spoilery on this game. Because I really want to get into details about exactly beat for beat what is wrong with what they did. But now is not the time. All I will say is that more and more, it seems like my suspicions and my concerns regarding The Last of Us 2 are bearing out. That I was accurate in my concerns going in, and you have no idea how much I wanted to be wrong. I really, really wanted to like this game. And I was expecting to be a little like, nah, okay, that ain't so great. But I was expecting to overall like it. And that is not what is happening here. Every concern I have is being borne out. And that's the last thing I'll leave on. I know I'm going a bit long, but hear me out. A tangible detail that I find really interesting in what Neil Druckmann said in that interview is it was one of the first E3s he ever went to. And that he's been around long enough that he should know, don't trust your impressions of things in the first couple E3s you go to. Because you are just so happy to be there that they could feed you shit and you think it's candy. I realized that retroactively when I started to absolutely hate the process of going to E3, and I questioned myself, like, was it always like this and I just didn't notice? And it did get worse over the years as it got more crowded and it got harder to get in and everything got more secretive. But to an extent, no, yeah, it was always kind of a shitty experience. I just didn't notice because the first couple years I was just giddy as anything to be in video game mecca. And so I'm very careful thinking about, did I really like those things then? Or was I just kind of bamboozled? And I realize more often than not, no, I was sucked into the hype. I felt legitimized. I felt validated in some way because I was there. Nerds acceptance thing. As I realized more and more, as I cared more and more about doing a job and getting really good content for people who watch my stuff, and it wasn't, oh wow, I'm here, it's got a job to do. I saw more and more how I really didn't bring it those first few years because I had no objectivity. Everything was just so amazing. So, moral of the story, don't just unquestioningly try to reproduce a feeling you had when something was new and shiny. You are not objective. You will not understand how open to other interpretations those experiences were, especially regarding things that were controversial at the time. All right. Hope you like this content. God, I don't know what's going to happen between today and tomorrow. I would really like to do something else, but I don't think I'm going to. I think I'm going to be going on this for a while now. God help us all. Help support this channel. Become a monthly patron. Patreon.com/Leanna K. Thanks for watching.